to clown. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the after show. And this week, well, I guess I'll hand it over to you in a second here.
No, keep going.
What I'm going to say is I want to thank everybody out there in listener land for supporting the show at patreon.com/P1 podcast. We really do appreciate your support. It keeps everything rolling and pays for our streaming accounts and all of this good stuff. So thank you very much. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Greg, who will be our host for this after show because he just so happened to select the topic.
To be fair, I was forced to select a topic.
You were, and this is because I don't want to have to be the one that selects a topic every single week. I wanted to at least make it something that you guys had to participate in, so that we would get participation from everybody. And yeah.
So the topic that I chose was just our memories of the year 2000.
2000.
Because the year 2000 was a pretty big year for lots of different reasons, but even in the video game world in particular. And it was a big year for me personally, professionally, because that was really, I started at Ziff Davis in 1999, but it was like October, the end of October. So 2000 was the year that my career kind of really started professionally. And also I made the transition over to EGM that year. It was the year that our friendship, I would say, really started in the form that it's in now anyway.
Yeah.
We knew each other before that, but you were at the Big Boy magazine and I was at Expert Gamer. So,
What do you mean? A lot of my friends were at Expert Gamer. Phil.
Yeah, whatever.
You?
Phil wasn't an Expert Gamer then.
Was he not?
No,
he was gone by then? Oh, okay.
He came in after I left.
Ah, okay.
He replaced me.
He did, but he was there for a little while before.
Succeeded me, I should say.
Right?
I don't believe he was. No, I think he was doing freelance for like OPM.
Maybe. Yeah, you might be right. Okay.
Yeah. So he wasn't there, so he doesn't matter for this story. But
okay.
But yeah, thinking of that, I'm trying to think like we must have become friends pretty quickly once I moved over to EGM because we progressed to the point where we hung out together in front of Best Buy to get our PlayStation 2s.
That's right. We were both on Vid Games as an IRC channel, so we knew each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Before, and yeah.
But we hadn't had a whole lot of interaction, even when I went to like E3 and stuff like that. I didn't really.
Had we not?
Not really. No,
sure
I knew
that?
Mark and John better than you.
Okay.
At that point, and Craig even. But yeah, no, it was a big year. It was a big year for games though, because of course the PlayStation 2. Came out that year.
PlayStation 2, both in Japan and the US.
And the US, and in Europe actually, or no, Australia, and Europe, they all everywhere. It came out all
everywhere.
And it was cool because of course the PlayStation 2, but also the Dreamcast was killing it that year. Right.
It had just come out in 99.
Right. And so we were getting like the second generation of titles on the Dreamcast at the same time the PlayStation 2 came out. So while the PlayStation 2 excitement was huge and the games looked really great, the Dreamcast was starting to get, I would almost say, a lot of the games that, looking back on it now, is what the system's remembered for.
Yes.
When you get past the launch games, this is the year that you got like the Jet Set Radio and Resident Evil Code Veronica and what was the Skies of Arcadia was another one. Like there were some big Dreamcast games,
and we were only a few months away from Phantasy Star Online.
Right,
that came out in January.
Right. So. And then you were also at the tail end of the PlayStation, and there was a lot of really, really massive plays. Like that was the year that Dragon Quest VII came out and Final Fantasy IX, and so it was really cool. There were a lot of systems there was the excitement of the new systems with the Dreamcast and the PlayStation 2, but like you were still getting big N64 games and big PlayStation games, and and they were really sort of at the end of their cycle. So we were getting sort of the best of what the system was going to get from a technical standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was just a really cool year.
It was. I went to Japan maybe 3 times in 2000. I went to Japan for the Japanese launch of the PS2. And this was the first time was in Japan for a system launch. And that included, camping out outside of Yodobashi Camera in Shinjuku. And I think also, if I remember correctly, there's a YouTube video now, footage of people getting their PS2s back in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm on that video buying the PS2.
Of course you are.
A Yodobashi Camera.
Because you didn't stick out at all.
No, you can't tell which one's me at all. But yeah, we had, so that launch, we had, lined up in the evening beforehand, and then they sent everybody home at like 1 a.m.
I was going to say, would they let you stay overnight on the street there?
They would have. Yeah. They would have. But what they did is they gave everybody tickets to come back at like 8 a.m. or whatever it was. And so ended up coming back.
God, can you imagine now? Those tickets would be on eBay so fast.
Yeah, exactly.
You only have an hour to buy.
Yeah. But I ended up buying my own Japanese PS2, and then like EGM's PS2s. Like we had something like 4 or 5 people in the line to buy. And so then I ended up putting 4 PS2s in my luggage back to the US that then would become, EGM's PlayStation 2s. So I ended up opening up the box, taking everything out, and just putting them in my suitcase and bringing them back. Yeah. I brought clothes that I was like ready to throw away on the trip.
Yes, so I remember you talking about that.
Wear it and then toss it. So socks that had holes in them, underwear that had holes in them, like t-shirts that were old and crummy, like, yeah, so that I could have space in my luggage for that stuff.
I think, and that's what's funny about that, is that I was sifting through sort of some of the old headlines and stuff, and I had almost forgotten about this, but remember that Reuters was actually reporting that what was it? Export controls placed on the PlayStation 2 by the Trade Ministry of Japan.
Yeah.
As the PS2 was sophisticated enough for military applications.
Right. It was like a supercomputer.
So what we're saying is CJ smuggled 4 PlayStation 2s out of Japan.
Did. Yeah, I basically did. Yeah, and customs, I was a little worried that I would be stopped by customs, but they didn't stop me. So
you're very trustworthy looking.
Yeah.
The other thing that was happening that year too, actually, which again, going back to Dreamcast, was also the year that SegaNet launched.
Yes.
Which I think is interesting because this week there's actually been a social media post going around about how, and I think it was just somebody trolling, but it got traction about how like the fact that we're all playing online now is entirely in thanks to Microsoft and the Xbox. I was like, no,
not entirely.
There was a company that was pushing, not that they were the first ever to do online play either, but there was a console company that was really pushing it because they were. I mean, that was a huge part of the Dreamcast in general.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember this, Greg. A little game came out in December 2000 called Speed Devils Online.
Yeah.
That we ended up playing a
lot of. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it reviewed too well.
No.
If I remember right. But we played so much of that, both in the office and at home.
I remember because could you name the rooms? Was that how it worked? When you created a room, we ended up using the phrase EGM somehow.
Yeah.
And that would always make sure we had
a full room.
Yeah. To race with.
We were shameless at that.
It was great.
Come play with the EGM editors.
Right. Yeah. Not in any, official capacity, but
no.
Yeah, why not? But yeah, and sticking with Sega 2, I think another big thing that happened this year that I'd forgotten about excuse me, I hadn't forgot it had happened, but I'd forgotten that it happened in 2000.
Mm.
Was that this was the year that Sega's the R&D divisions like AM2 and things like that, they became individual companies. So like this was the year that like Smilebit happened and Hitmaker happened and Sega Rosso, I think,
Game Artists.
United Game Artists. Like, so basically all the Sega teams that we had all known as like AM 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Sonic Team, etc. Sonic Team retained their name as did AM2. But they all became like companies, individual development companies. They were all reabsorbed eventually, but it was cool because, I mean, it was laying the groundwork, I guess, whether they meant to or not at the time, where they were going to go third party. But it was really neat because it gave them a chance to have very distinct game styles within the Sega umbrella. It was a really cool thing. I thought it was great anyway. You know, because up until that point, if it wasn't Sonic Team or AM2, it was just kind of Sega.
Yeah.
And, you know, being able to, I think that allowed certain developers to really rise to the top as well. We started to learn more names outside of Yu Suzuki and Yuji Naka in Sega. And there was some really, it was when I think from an arcade standpoint and a home development standpoint that Sega was at its sort of most creative. They were really at its zenith at that point. Which was a shame that the Dreamcast was getting ready to fall. But that's one of the reasons, another reason why 2000 really sticks out to me, because I think like that was the year of Space Channel 5 as well, and like again Skies of Arcadia and all those great Dreamcast games.
I remember we were driving to a UFC event in Iowa, me and Greg, and it was the week that Space Channel 5 was going to come out. And actually during this time, I don't think video games had really had like a release day, right? It was still kind of,
it was becoming a little more common.
It's coming out this week, but who knows if the store will actually have it. And we stopped at a Best Buy in Iowa somewhere. I don't remember where exactly.
It's so stupid when you think about it. But
we were like, oh, Best Buy, let's get off this exit.
Let's see if they have Space Channel 5.
And they did.
When we bought it, so we could buy it and look at the case until we got back to Chicago after this trip. And then played it. It's like, it's so dumb. So dumb. But it's, you know what? Like, that's forever ingrained. When I think of Space Channel 5, I think of going to UFC with CJ. Because, which, by the way, we were going as part of the UFC video game.
It was a junket.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we were choosing.
Just like, oh my God, let's go see UFC. But, although it was cool. The main event sucked, but it was cool.
It was very cool. We got to see the octagon and
have breakfast with the fighters and stuff.
That was cool. Yeah, that was really
neat.
Cool.
Yeah. So
I don't know if you remember this.
CJ's got props.
I've got props. So this is EGM's E3 issue, and it's Sonic. It's a Sonic cover where I guess we were gonna have some screenshots of Sonic Adventure 2 at that point, and then Phantasy Star Online, etc. But and this isn't the first time we did a Dreamcast cover like this.
EGM loved the Dreamcast.
And EGM loved the Dreamcast, yeah. And this cover was something that I heard through the grapevine that Yuji Naka hated this cover, the stance that's Sonic was taking, and he doesn't have the green eyes either in this.
Oh, really?
Image. I think this is a render that we contracted somebody out to do or something.
I didn't know that.
I don't think this is a Sega render or anything like that. I don't think. I might be wrong on that. But anyway, I heard that he hated this cover, and then I had him sign it at E3. You can kind of see that.
I can see it. What number is that?
It's 131.
That is my first issue.
Really?
Yep. It's the first issue I worked on. Yep.
Your E3 issue? Okay. This was the first one. So, obviously it was done before E3. This was the issue that you would pick up at an E3 booth.
Right.
So, yeah. But
so luckily, the show where Yuji Naka would be there and that people would be carrying it around. And
that's right. Yeah. So,
but yeah, that was my first issue, which I don't I guess I must have. Yeah, I must have gone to E3 with EGM that year.
You must
Then,
have. Yeah, you
yeah.
must have.
So the
Yeah.
first E3 I went to with Ziff Davis would have been as part of EGM.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course I think we've told this on the show, but one of the big memories that year for me was also, of course, getting my PlayStation 2, which was the American PS2, obviously, and
Mm.
doing that with you.
Yeah.
Um, going to Best Buy in Lombard.
Yeah.
We didn't plan on staying in line.
No, we didn't.
I
So
don't remember why we decided to.
earlier, this was at a time when we didn't get hardware from the
No.
companies like Nintendo, Sega. They weren't sending out hardware that we could then take home. So,
Hmm.
uh, I
Microsoft was really one of the first to do that, I think.
Microsoft was one of the first. Yeah. We had. I was going around, bouncing around to different Best Buys and stores that evening just because the PS2 launch was such a big thing, and taking, photos of people standing in line or sitting in line in some respects. I think this night there's still a photo that comes up on the
Circulates
internet
all the time.
all the time of people playing the Dreamcast, I think.
No, it was PlayStation.
Was it
I
PlayStation?
think they were playing Madden.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were people outside of a Best Buy that had a generator and a little TV and a PlayStation. They were playing Madden, and that picture that I took circulates. I see it at least once a year.
Yeah, me too. I see it in some of the various Facebook groups I'm in. They're not even necessarily video game groups. Like one of them's a CRT group, where and sometimes anytime it pops up, usually they don't even know why
What
they're
it is.
outside
Right,
playing it.
right.
It's just that they're playing on a CRT, and it's always like, can you name what model this is? And I'll always pop in and say like, oh, actually, I know the guy who took that picture. Now, what I used
Yeah.
to mistake that for was our line,
No,
but it
that is not
wasn't.
our line.
But there were people in our line playing on a TV.
Yeah, but I think they
It was
were
plugged
in
into
the
a car or
parking lot,
something. Yeah.
not actually in the line like
Yeah.
this other group was.
But yeah, so it was a different line in somewhere in Chicago, the Chicagoland area. But
It was the Best Buy in Aurora,
there you go.
Fox Valley.
So I always tell people that it's like, oh, actually, I know the person who took this photo, and that's what it is. So, but yeah, that's the Best Buy that we were in was Lombard, because that's where I was living at the time, was in Lombard. And actually, the Best Buy was like, I think there was like a field between the back of the Best Buy and my condo units, or whatever you would call the place I was living.
I think you did have to. It wasn't like walkable though. You had to drive there.
Yeah, it was walkable there if you wanted to walk through a field in the dark, which I wasn't going to do. But no, then, and yeah, I don't remember why we decided to, because I remember we went and were looking at the line. I didn't go to all the different lines with you that night, but for some reason I think it was just more of a like, I'm going to go check out what the line looks like, and then when we saw it, we decided, hey, we should get in line. What number? Do you remember what number we were? Like 30 something?
I have it. Hold on, I have a photo of our tickets.
There you go.
Because they had pre-order tickets, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can find it.
But anyway, while you're looking for that, we were not prepared for it at all. So where we were just next door to my place, I seem to remember, CJ, you getting in line for us, and we got our tickets, and then I actually went home and grabbed some stuff, like some blankets and stuff like that. And then we stayed up the whole night on a November night in Chicago.
That's right.
Crazy. I would never, ever do that again, although I did do it a few more times. But there's also a picture of me that you took that I share to people every now and then. Actually, it's in
62
my latest
62
and 60. Okay, so it's the 60s, not the 30s.
Yeah.
It's in one of the latest videos that I worked on. Actually, it's in the Ridge Racer video that will be coming out early next month. Because Ridge Racer 5 was a game that I bought that morning when I got my PS2, which was one of the top selling games in Japan that year.
Yeah.
But yeah, another great memory I have of 2000. Again, it's video game related, but it was my career really sort of kicking off was Metal Gear Solid on the Game Boy Color. Because I worked with Mark McDonald on strategy guide for that game
Hmm.
that was posted in Expert Gamer, but was also, I think it was Pocket Games issue 2. It was the cover game for Pocket Games, which Mark
Hmm.
at that point was running. So that was a special. So in the Ziff Davis office that we were in, on a monthly basis, we published Expert Gamer, Official PlayStation Magazine, and Electronic Gaming Monthly. Those were the 3 magazines that came out of that office. CGW was the computer magazine. That was in San Francisco, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
So those were the 3 game magazines that came out of that office. But then we would also publish, like, I guess we just called them specials.
Yeah.
One of those was like the video game review issue from EGM, where we would like review the systems and just a bunch of different articles from the year and that sort of thing. And I don't think we had awards in those at that point. I think they were in the main magazine at that point.
Yeah.
But I think that's how it started. But one of the series, the specials series would be was Pocket Games, which was actually the first thing I ever wrote for at Ziff Davis. Mark McDonald was the editor-in-chief of the first issue, and I wrote a bunch of reviews for that issue. That was my first gig. And then, so he was still doing it because it was usually made up of an editor from one of those 3 magazines would be running it. A managing editor usually was Dan Peluso, who was, I think that's all he was doing then, was specials.
I think so. No, he was also, wasn't he on the PlayStation magazine as well?
If he was, he wasn't the managing editor anymore because Gary Steinman was.
Okay, yeah, you might be right. He might have shifted over to specials entirely.
Right. I know when I left, I was working with him a lot on Pocket Games, actually. He and I did Pocket Games for a while after I left Ziff Davis. But anyway, and then a mixture of Ziff Davis editors and freelancers.
Yeah.
And a lot, and some repurposed content as well. But one of the things we ended up doing was Metal Gear Solid for the Game Boy Color, and Mark and I worked on that together, and it was a lot of fun.
Nice.
But yeah, I didn't realize that was that year as well. But
yeah, we did like a Dreamcast magazine, DCM.
Yep, DCM
at that point, which I think Che was technically in charge of that one. Yeah. This was a time when I had moved out of my parents' house and had my first apartment around that time, and that was great. And yeah, it was. I remember many late nights at the office.
Oh yeah,
in Oak Brook is where we were at that point, and sleeping on the floor of my cube at
same.
A couple of times, and yeah, it was very different.
Although
once we moved to San Francisco, none of that happened anymore.
Yeah.
We
were
a
different atmosphere,
much more diligent about deadlines and getting things done early.
Although I think back because there were times that I slept at the office too, but thinking back on it, I don't understand why I did.
Me
I
neither.
lived so close.
Well, I think part of it too was we were young and we all loved video games, and there were video games at the office and food there. Like, why would you even go home?
Fair enough. But yeah, I remember a lot of late nights there. I mean, and not even like because of deadlines, but just hanging out.
Yeah. I
remember you and I sitting there listening to Ice, Vanilla Ice Live.
Oh yeah. Vanilla Ice Live, lots of that. Was this the time, or was this a little later when you and I would go to dinner with Ethan? Go to Baker Square with Ethan.
I would say probably by the end of this year, we probably were. Oh, Baker Square. I hadn't thought about that in years.
Yeah. I don't know if that still exists. Certainly not in that part of Illinois anymore, but
yeah.
I
can't remember if Ethan was one of our freelancers by the end of this year or not. But
I'm pretty sure
that's how Ethan started out. Was he was a freelancer at EGM.
Yeah, he was a freelancer.
I just threw all the Game Boy Color games at him that I could find.
That's right.
But I do remember going to like Steak and Shake.
Hell yeah!
I remember going to what was the arcade?
Enchanted Castle.
No, DreamWorks. No, that's not. That
What?
was that was a studio. What was the Sega arcade?
Sega Arcade.
It started as a
You
Sega
mean like
arcade.
Dave and Buster's?
Not Dave and Buster's. It wasn't called Dave and Buster's when we were going, but it was like a Dave and Buster's. I have to look it up.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Anyway, we used to go play Dance Dance Revolution there all the time.
Dave and Buster's.
It was not Dave and Buster's.
Well, that's where we played DDR.
Anyway, going to play a lot of DDR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't play DDR anymore.
Why?
No, I don't think I could do it.
Oh, you mean okay? You physically can.
Physically,
Okay, you made it. I thought you were saying that you weren't like capable of it.
Well, I don't know.
So CJ, by the way, was really good at Dance Dance Revolution.
I enjoyed DDR. Yeah,
we used to go. It was a group of your friends.
Yeah.
From the Illinois area.
Yeah, actually, Phil's friends.
I first met Phil.
They were Phil's friends before they were my friends.
Okay, and that was where I first met Phil because he didn't work
right
at Ziff Davis at the time.
Yeah,
but yeah, like you and Phil and Phil's friends, we would go somewhere to eat, and then we would go to, I guess, Dave and Buster's.
Yeah,
it's GameWorks. GameWorks is what it was called.
GameWorks. Okay, was it GameWorks then? I guess it was. You're right.
Yeah,
it's GameWorks.
It was GameWorks. Right. Yes, which was like Dave and Buster's.
Yeah, yeah, but it was not Dave and Buster's.
Yeah, but yeah, it was. And then we just go play DDR. Like we didn't even play many of the other arcade games in there. We would just go play DDR for hours.
And hours, also like the bartenders loved us because we would just get water.
Order water. A bunch of nerds. Oh my god!
On a Friday or Saturday night, ordering water at the bar. How freaking ridiculous!
Bunch of 20-somethings. Taking turns on DDR, drinking gallons of water.
Yeah.
Not spending a goddamn cent otherwise.
Exactly. No kidding.
Because we'd already eaten.
This is why GameWorks went out of business. Yeah, exactly. I think we've cracked it.
Oh my god. But it was a great time, man. It was, like I said, it was a huge year for me. It was a huge year for video games.
It was
huge year for me professionally because I couldn't believe that I'd landed that job there because it was what I wanted to do with my life. And like to have gotten in at Ziff Davis and then have gotten onto EGM, which I mean, the two biggest magazines in the country for video games at that point were GamePro and EGM.
Yeah.
And, I didn't really have an interest in working at GamePro. Not that I don't like GamePro or that I didn't like that. I never met the people there up at that point. I didn't think the people there would be great, but I mean, I couldn't even describe what it felt like to have a job at EGM.
Yeah.
And that was the year I got it. And also, it wasn't the first time I lived away from home, but it was the first time I lived that far away from home. Like I was always within driving distance up until that point, and I was still in Canada up until that point. So it was a huge shift for me. And again, from a personal level, meeting you and Phil that year, I mean, that was when this friendship that created Player One Podcast. That's the year it started.
That's true.
Really?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, yeah, it was a big time.
And probably Greg Ford was around then too, right?
He wasn't until Chicago. He was hired, or until San Francisco. He was hired when we moved to San Francisco.
That's
like
right.
2003?
No, he was. I thought he was. It's 2. Yeah.
Shane Bettenhausen was around before we moved to San Francisco as a freelancer. Because this was also the year. Actually, this was the year that Gamers.com happened.
Oh, you're right.
So, and that was the reason I ended up on EGM. So, that's another
people left.
Right, that's another story to tell. So, when in October '99 is when I got there, and John Riccardi, who was part of the review crew, they'd done a shuffle, right? Because John had ended up being the editor-in-chief at Expert Gamer, beginning of that year, '99, maybe late '98, and then Craig Kuyava had been made editor-in-chief of OPM.
Yeah.
and John Davison was still running EGM, but they'd shuffled around the staff a little bit. And then when I got there, was late '99, but then before the middle of before June, I'd say before May, a bunch of them left for Gamers.com.
Yes.
Like John Riccardi, Che Chow, Dan Shu.
Yep.
No, not Dan Shu.
Yes.
Dan Shu. Who else? Andrew Burwell,
art director.
There were more, but a lot of them left for Gamers.com, which led to a big shuffle because they moved John Davison over to OPM and moved Craig back over to EGM.
No,
they did. Craig moved over when I did.
He became a regular editor, but Joe Funk became the editor-in-chief.
No, I know. Yeah, sorry, I should have. Yeah, they made Craig a regular editor at EGM.
Yeah,
they moved Mark McDonald from OPM to EGM. They were going to move Joe Rubicki from OPM to EGM.
Yeah,
but Joe didn't want to go because he had been. I think he'd been at OPM from the start.
Yes,
and when it was. Before it was official, I think, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And then the other thing is that he really liked, or I think he was close friends with John Davison, and he wanted to work with him.
Yeah.
So he wanted to stay. So he actually went to whoever he had to go to and suggested that they move me to EGM instead.
Oh, okay.
So I took the position that Joe Rubicki was supposed to take, who we should try to get on the show at some time.
We should,
because I haven't talked to Joe in years, but he was like one of my favorite people in that building. And then Todd Zuniga, who had started at Expert Gamer a month or two before me, he shifted to OPM as well.
Yeah.
And then I think that was also sort of the trigger for they started hiring at OPM, and that's when Chris Baker came along. He was very soon after all that happened too. But that was all because a bunch of people were lured away by the money of Gamers.com.
I had forgotten about that.
Yeah. So
interesting. Yeah.
And most of them came back.
They did.
In various forms.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Big year.
Really big year. I'm looking at the list of games that came out in 2000. Just a lot of really great stuff.
I know.
That's a Radio, right? Like you were talking about, Resident Evil Code Veronica. But then also stuff like Wario Land 3.
Yep. The Sims. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, I think it was that year.
Yeah.
Diablo 2. UFC. Pokemon Stadium. Final Fantasy 9. Majora's Mask.
Perfect Dark.
Yeah. Deus Ex.
Yep. Skies of Arcadia. Quake 3 Arena. I don't know if you remember this. So Quake 3 Arena on the Dreamcast was the first online game that I really played, and I bought my copy at CompUSA because they had broken Street Date on it.
Yeah.
So I bought that along with the keyboard and mouse for the Dreamcast and played Quake 3 Arena on Dreamcast. It was fantastic. Really, really good time.
I remember people playing a lot of that in the office.
Yeah.
I never really did, but
that was a good time. Really good time.
Perfect Dark was that year too.
Perfect Dark, yeah.
NFL 2K1. My God, the list of games for this year is crazy. Now that I'm looking at it,
a lot of classics, right?
SSX,
Excite Bike 64,
Paper Mario. Oh, I have a story about Paper Mario. So, and I know we're going a little over the half hour, but I don't care. I'm telling the story.
All right.
So back then, Nintendo was super, super careful about sending out. Well, they didn't send out review or preview games. So you know what we were getting as we moved into CD-ROM stuff. You just get burnt discs, right? That would have to work in specific, depending on which company. Nintendo or Sega, you used a key disc for the Dreamcast. Nintendo cartridges were just cartridges. PlayStation, you needed the blue PlayStation. It was a dev kit or what it was. Anyway,
or you had a mod chip.
But so Nintendo were so worried about piracy that when they had a game to send out, they would actually send out usually like they were usually counselors, I think, the Nintendo counselors a lot of the times. They would send out some poor person whose job it was to technically sit there with you while you played the game, although a lot of them didn't, which was fine. They were in the building, but they weren't sitting over your shoulder or anything all the time.
Mostly I remember them sitting in the same room, but maybe not really paying attention.
Exactly. I'm trying to make sure that it doesn't sound like they were telling you what to do or where to go.
No, they weren't at all.
That was never happening.
No.
They were in the room, doing the equivalent of whatever it is that somebody does when they're on their cell phone and not paying attention to you.
But
whatever
this was a time before cell phones.
I know.
Before,
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
And
reading the newspaper.
The games would be in the consoles already and covered with a big steel...
A lockbox.
Lockbox.
Yeah.
Right? So if it was a Game Boy, it would have a big steel box on it.
Yeah.
That you would be playing through. And for like the N64, like you could plug controllers and you could plug connectors in, but the system and the ROM cartridge itself were all locked together. And I don't believe they had the keys.
No.
To get into them.
Yeah.
But they would show up with these, suitcases with these systems in it, depending on how many they had.
Well, and the locks would have a sticker over them, right?
Right. They were
like
sealed.
A tamper-proof sticker.
Yeah. So anyway, that was fine. But then the problem was that you only had the amount of time that the person was there.
Yeah.
To play the game, which was okay for a lot of games, but especially when, hey, Paper Mario, an RPG, you got to play a lot of that, right? Yeah. And so there was, I wish I could remember her name, but the rep who showed up, really nice lady, and she came into our office first thing in for however long she was there. She came into our office first thing in the morning, and we had a game room, we called it, I guess, but it was just a little sort of soundproofed, big television, sort of auditorium seating. It wasn't huge, but there was raised seating in the back and some comfortable chairs. And that's where we played Paper Mario. And she came in first thing in the morning, and I was the big reviewer on that game. So it was me who was playing it the most. And we would sit there for hours and I would play, and then I would stay late. I mean, I drove her back to her hotel probably 12:30, 1 o'clock every night she was there.
Yeah.
And she didn't complain about it. She was super nice about it. She was very nice. Like I said, I mean, obviously, like, we fed her and all that sort of thing. Yeah. But yeah, that was how I reviewed Paper Mario, was sitting in that room with her. And I forget who the other two reviewers were, but they were sort of in and out of the room the whole time. And just driving her back to her hotel in the middle of the night over and over and over again. And then I think picking her up in the morning to take her back into the office.
Yeah.
But I do remember the other thing about that is that when they would make that trip, it was sort of, they would do the rounds because, of course, we were in Chicago. Most of the games media was out west. But Game Informer was, I think it still is, up in Minneapolis.
Minneapolis, yeah.
So Nintendo would always... every company that was doing a press tour would always pair us up, right? They'd either come to us and then go to Minneapolis, or go to Minneapolis and then come to us. And so I knew exactly how far Game Informer got when they reviewed Paper Mario, because their save file was still on the cartridge.
That's right. You knew exactly how many hours where they had played up to, right?
I'm just going to tell you we went further. But that's all I'm going to say.
Well, and Game Informer, too, at that time had a reputation for not liking Nintendo games.
Oh, I forgot about that.
You remember that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there would be a low score, usually.
But anyway, yeah, I can't remember her name. I kept in touch with her for a while after that. And I think if she was a game counselor when she first came to us, because it wasn't ever the same person twice.
No,
I don't seem to remember.
Yeah.
I know she moved up in Nintendo for a little while, but I have no idea where she is now. So, because that was 20 years ago, but almost 25 years ago. But anyway,
yeah.
But yeah, man, so many big games that year. I'm still going through this list, and it's just crazy.
And it was just a great time also to be in the games media too. It was just a fun time. And I look back on that time and can't believe how lucky I was to be on EGM at that time. Like,
it was the best.
Super good.
I mean, not, I'm sure it would have been awesome to be there in the late 90s as well. That was when I wanted to be there. But I mean, I feel like I was on that magazine for a short amount of time, but it felt like the peak.
Yeah.
Nothing against the crew that came after, because
And I think
it stayed really good for a long time.
A lot of people look at the One Up days and the One Up show and
Right.
that stuff as being the
I
pinnacle.
feel that was the peak of, how do I put this? Like the Ziff Davis game group sort of pushing into the future.
Yeah.
Like that era was about One Up.
Yes.
And was about those podcasts and was about those shows for very good reason.
About
they were
the magazines.
They were not so much about the magazine, but in this era, just before that was really becoming a thing, and that magazines were still the focus and EGM was still the flagship, I feel really lucky to have been part of it.
Yeah.
At that precise moment, because it was a little bit rough during 2000, because, to be honest, the team was holding it together in a big way. And a lot of that goes to, I mean, everybody on the team contributed. I think a lot of that credit should go to Mark McDonald personally. And Crispin Boyer, the two of them in particular. They really kept that thing running. And then when Dan Shu came back and took over, that space of time to me was when we had the greatest team. We were producing the greatest issues. I am so proud of everything we did. I'm proud of everything we did anyway, but that when Dan came back, he was like the last piece. We had this super functioning team that had been through a little bit of a rough time at the beginning of 2000, but they were all the right people, and we all clicked, and we all contributed, and we all had a role. And then when Dan came in again, he was like, it was like putting that last piece in a jigsaw puzzle that just clicked and made it an amazing place to work. And we produced amazing magazines as far as I was concerned. And I feel like, especially that last year or so in Chicago, we were killing it.
I agree. Yeah.
So yeah, man, I have lots of fond memories of that time.
Me too. Lots of Hydro Thunder fueled Code Red evenings. Yeah.
25-cent Code Reds.
25-cent Code Reds.
That's why I'm so fat. Not the only reason, but it didn't help.
Yes. Well, is that where we want to leave it?
I think that's where we're leaving it.
Alrighty. Well, thank you, Greg, for picking that topic. That was a lot of fun to chat with you about the year 2000. Seems Y2K is 24 years
we
ago.
Survived it. Who knew it was never going to be better?
Never?
No, it was a little bit better.
I don't know. I think video games, I think we're in the golden age of video games now. Like there's so much coming out. Although looking at the release calendar of the year 2000, there was a lot, but even now I feel like there's just a ton of games.
I feel like the difference was that it was a smaller industry back then.
Yeah.
But it made the big games feel
much bigger. Yeah, absolutely.
You're right. Today, from a standpoint of something for everyone, it's never been better.
Never been better.
I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah. Oh man, I forgot a game I didn't even talk about that I played during
Samba de
Steam
Amigo?
Next Fest.
Oh, sorry.
No, from the regular episode. Okay. I'm not gonna talk about it now because it's completely disjointed.
I just kept going through this list and it's like, oh my god, we didn't talk about Samba de Amigo. We didn't talk about Crazy Taxi. Anyway.
Yeah. Samba de Amigo, a game I played in the office, and the OPM guys wanted to kill me because I was playing it during their deadline, and it was very loud maraca sounds coming from the next area over.
But I mean, Gary Steinman, famously a patient man. So
right. Anyway, I want to thank all of you listeners out there in Radioland for supporting the show. Thank you again. And I hope all of you out there are safe and well. Hope your family, friends, loved ones are safe and well as well. And we'll talk at you again next a week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.